It was 2 a.m. when the Ring doorbell camera notification jolted Kevin awake. His heart pounded as he reached for his phone, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness. The live feed revealed a figure moving cautiously in the shadows outside his front door. The person was hunched over, walking with a deliberate, almost predatory gait. A hat pulled low, a face mask, and sunglasses concealed every inch of the stranger's face. Kevin's stomach churned with fear. The figure reached the door and tried the handle, jiggling it quietly, but the lock held firm. Kevin's breath caught in his throat as the man's hands moved to the doorbell. There was a brief, frantic fiddling with the device, and Kevin realized the intruder was trying to remove it. But the camera stayed put, its unblinking eye capturing every movement. The man's frustration was palpable as he covered the camera with his hand. A chill ran down Kevin's spine. He quickly dialed 911, whispering urgently to the operator, his voice trembling as he described the scene unfolding on his screen. The operator advised him to stay inside, to keep quiet, and not to Kevin barely nodded, his eyes glued to the video feed. The man moved away from the door, disappearing off camera for a moment, and then Kevin heard it. A soft, unsettling rattle at the side entrance. That door, Kevin knew, was sometimes left unlocked by mistake. His pulse quickened, and a wave of relief washed over him when he remembered locking it earlier that night. Still, the sound of the intruder's attempts to break in was nerve-wracking. Then, in the eerie stillness of the night, the man's voice rang out through the door, shockingly clear. "Hello," he called, his tone unnervingly cheerful, almost as if he were greeting an old friend. "Hello," he repeated louder this time, the false friendliness in his voice more disturbing than anything else. Kevin didn't move, didn't make a sound. The man's greetings turned into sharp, insistent banging on the door. Kevin's mind raced with thoughts of what could happen if the intruder managed to get inside. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the banging stopped. The man was gone, leaving Kevin staring at the dark screen, his breath coming in shallow, shaky gasps. The police arrived minutes later, but it was too late. The man had vanished into the night, leaving behind only the grainy footage of his failed attempt. Kevin spent the rest of the night in a daze, unable to sleep, his mind replaying the chilling events over and over. The image of the masked stranger haunted him for days. Even after he changed the locks and installed extra security, the unease lingered. He would never forget the feeling of being watched, of knowing that someone had been so close to invading his home, his sanctuary. And the worst part was, he never found out who that person was or what they wanted. The unknown gnawed at him, a constant reminder that safety is never guaranteed, even in the place you call home. The early morning hours had always been quiet in Paul's neighborhood, a sleepy cul-de-sac where nothing much ever happened. But on this particular morning, at 4:30 a.m., his phone buzzed with an alert that sent a shiver down his spine. The motion-activated camera at his front door had captured something. Still half asleep, Paul tapped on the notification, expecting to see a stray cat or perhaps a raccoon. Instead, he was met with the sight of a man, completely naked, sprinting across his front yard. The man was gaunt, his skin pale under the harsh glow of the porch light. He ran with a frantic energy, one hand clutched awkwardly over his groin as he approached Paul's front door. Paul's heart pounded as he watched the man stop, his chest heaving, eyes wide with what looked like sheer terror. The man's movements were erratic, and his expression shifted between fear and wild, unhinged panic. Paul quickly grabbed his phone, ready to call the police, but hesitated for a moment, transfixed by the bizarre scene playing out on his screen. The man reached the front door, his fingers fumbling desperately at the doorbell. He rang it over and over, the sound echoing through Paul's house, a relentless, piercing cry for help. The man's face, twisted in a mix of pain and madness, filled the screen as he leaned into the camera, mumbling incoherently. Paul's gut told him something was very wrong. He could see the man was in distress, but there was something else, an unpredictable, dangerous energy that made Paul's skin crawl. The doorbell continued to ring, each chime more urgent than the. Paul's finger hovered over the call button on his phone, but before he could press it, the man suddenly turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had come. It wasn't until later that Paul learned the truth. The man had been high on crystal meth, delirious with fear, convinced that snakes were slithering inside his clothes. In his drug-induced frenzy, he had stripped naked and run through the neighborhood, pounding on doors and ringing doorbells, begging for help from anyone who would listen. The police had found him about an hour later, not far from Paul's house, and took him into custody. Paul was left shaken, haunted by the memory of the man's wild eyes and desperate cries. The quiet of his neighborhood had been shattered, replaced by an uneasy tension that lingered long after the man was gone. Paul couldn't shake the image of the man, terrified and alone, running through the night with nowhere to go. It was a stark reminder that danger could come from anywhere, at any time, even in the most unexpected and unsettling forms. It was just after 10 p.m. when Henry heard the doorbell ring. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at this hour, but without thinking, he made his way to the front door. He didn't even bother to check the ring camera, a habit he had never really gotten into. The bell rang again, more insistently this time, and Henry's heart raced as he reached for the doorknob. He opened the door without hesitation, only to be greeted by a figure standing too close for comfort. The man was hooded, his face partially obscured by the shadows. "Hello," the man said, his voice unnervingly calm and friendly. "Hi," Henry replied, his own voice sounding more welcoming than it should have under the circumstances. There was something off about the stranger's demeanor, a subtle menace lurking beneath his overly polite tone. Henry's instinct screamed at him to slam the door shut, but he hesitated, confused by the man's disarming approach. "Who are you?" Henry asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man didn't answer. Instead, he pushed forward, his foot sliding into the gap between the door and the frame. Panic surged through Henry as he realized too late that he had made a grave mistake. He shoved the man back with all his strength, but not before the intruder's fist lashed out, smashing into the glass panel of the door. The sound of shattering glass jolted Henry into action. He slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands as the man outside cursed and pounded on the door, his attempts to force it open growing more desperate. Henry could barely think, his mind a whirl of fear and adrenaline. He fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The operator's voice was a distant hum in his ear as Henry kept his eyes on the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. But after a few more tense seconds, the pounding stopped. The man outside muttered something under his breath, then turned and walked away. When the police arrived, they found nothing but a few shards of broken glass on the porch. The man was gone, vanished into the darkness. Henry was left with a deep sense of unease that clung to him long after the incident. He replayed the moment in his mind over and over, berating himself for his carelessness. He had been too trusting, too quick to open the door to a stranger. And though he had managed to keep the man out, the encounter left him with a lingering fear that he could never quite shake. The world outside his door no longer felt safe, and Henry knew he would never make the same mistake again. Jessica was scrolling through her phone when the ring notification popped up, signaling movement outside her front door. It was a little after 10 p.m., and she wasn't expecting any visitors. Curiosity piqued. She opened the app, and the live feed showed a man standing at the edge of her porch, his face obscured by a stark white mask. He was staring directly into the camera, his eyes hidden behind the hollow black holes of the mask. A wave of cold fear washed over Jessica. The man's presence was unsettling enough, but it was the way he stood there perfectly still that sent chills down her spine. Kayla had met him through a mutual friend, never suspecting that their brief acquaintance would turn into a nightmare. At first, it was just a few harmless messages, small talk, compliments, but then it escalated. The messages became more frequent, more insistent, and when Kayla stopped responding, the voicemail started. At first, they were just desperate, pleading for her to call back, but soon they turned. She changed her number, blocked him on every social media platform, and thought that was the end of it. But then, one night, her phone buzzed with a notification from her Ring camera. Kayla's blood ran cold when she saw the name on the screen, but it was him, the stalker. He was outside her door at 2 a.m., his face twisted into a cruel, mocking grin. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched him on the live feed, his eyes scanning the house as if he could see her through the camera. He rang the doorbell once, twice, and then leaned in close to the camera. "Kayla?" he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "I know you're in there." Kayla backed away from the door, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She had no idea how he had found her new address, but it didn't matter now. He was here, and she was alone. She dialed 911, trying to keep her voice steady as she explained the situation to the operator. The minutes dragged on like hours as she waited for the police to arrive, her eyes locked. He didn't move. He just stood there, smiling that same twisted smile, as if he knew she was watching. When the red and blue lights finally flashed outside, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as the police pulled up. They searched the area but found nothing, no sign of him anywhere. Kayla filed for a restraining order the next morning. She moved again, this time to a different city, hoping to put as much distance between herself and the nightmare as possible. For a while, it seemed to work. The voicemail stopped, the messages ceased, and Kayla began to believe she was finally free. But the fear never left her. Every time she walked down a dark street, every time she heard footsteps behind her, she couldn't help but look over her shoulder. She knew he was out there somewhere, and she could never shake the feeling that one day he would come back. The thought haunted her, a shadow that followed her wherever she went, and even though she tried to move on, the memory of that night, the night he stood at her door smiling, would never leave her.